Hey, second grade, it's Mrs. Masterson. And today, instead of teaching you about handwriting, I get to teach you about math. Today's lesson is actually about intersecting and perpendicular line segments. But before I teach you about those, I'd like to review what parallel line segments are. If you guys look, I have 4 really good examples of parallel lines. Parallel lines are lines that are equal distance apart and they will never, ever touch. These arrows indicate that these lines would go on forever and ever, but even if they went off the page, this pair of lines would never touch. And in fact, when you look at the word parallel, these 2 L's here help me to remember that they are 2 line segments that would never touch but are equal distance apart. So I know you know the concept of parallel, but I'd also like to review how to find parallel line segments in our shapes. So right here, I've got 2 shapes. We all know that this one's a, square, and this one's a rectangle. And if I asked you guys to find 2 line segments in my square that would be parallel, let's review what that means. Lines that are equal distance apart and will never touch. Do you see 2 lines on my square that would never touch and are equal distance apart? How many of you feel that my vertical lines here are parallel? If you thought so, you are right. But not only are my vertical lines a good set of parallel lines, there's another set. Look carefully. Aha! If you also think that my horizontal lines would be a good example of parallel lines, you are right. So if we move over to the rectangle, anybody want to venture a guess on some parallel lines? The vertical lines would be one good example. And again, my horizontal lines. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, I've got 3 examples of some line segments in pairs. Here's A, here's B, and here's C. Now look carefully because only one of those pairs shows a good example of parallel. Anybody want to guess? If you guessed C, then you would be correct because those 2 lines would never touch. This one eventually is going to run into the horizontal one, and my oblique line, if it keeps going, guess where he's going? Yep, right into my vertical. So now that we've got parallel lines figured out, can we go into intersecting lines? I've got some more of our dry erase boards here, and I've got 5 sets of lines, okay? These lines intersect. Intersect means that the lines touch. These lines don't run next to each other like parallel. They actually touch each other. And the point at which these lines touch each other is called the intersection. Just like when you guys see 2 roads that cross over, we call them lines that intersect. We call them roads that have an intersection. Now, perpendicular lines not only touch and have an intersection, but when they intersect, they are going to have a right angle. Last week, Mrs. Kessler taught you about right angles in math. Do you remember her little trick? She told us to take a small piece of paper and try to insert it where the 2 lines touch to find a right angle. And if you look at this first pair of lines, sure enough, there's a right angle. In fact, there's not just 1, there's 2, there's 3, and actually, there's going to be 4 in those 2 lines. If I move over here to the T-looking line, you guys see that one? Do you see some right angles there? Yep, 1 on the left and 1 over here on the right. And if we go to what I call the upside down T, again, 2 right angles. How about if I move over here to the L? Do you see any more right angles? Yep, right there in the corner. And finally, over here at the X, I not only see 1, but just like that plus, there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so to review, perpendicular lines are line segments that intersect and they make right angles. All right, second grade, you have a good week. We'll talk to you soon.